Frugal Tech here. I got another question from Scott L. He wrote me about the AX53 being a little bit noisy when you first powered up and the shutter making a noise and alerting deer. And said, yeah, not much can really be done about that. So Scott wrote me back and says, thanks for replying to my concern about the external shutter sound alerting deer. Realizing that there's no remedy, now considering the AX700 or the Panasonic G9, G9 with the 4/3 sensor should give me better performance along with 4K 60 than the AX700, but the AX700 with phase and contrast AF would be nice to have. Thoughts? Well, I'm going to tell you right now, Scott, I tend to be somewhat biased towards the Sony Handycam for content creation, for video. You know, camcorders were designed first and foremost for video, whereas whether it's a DSLR, you know, a mirrorless camera, whatever, photography was always their primary design. So with the camcorder, the Handycam, you know, ergonomics plays into it, but there's other factors that we're going to talk about. Now, I looked at the G9. Body alone's around $1,500, and then whatever you're going to spend on lenses, $800, $1,000, $1,200 for lenses, for a lens, plus any ND filters that you might need because you're going to be outdoors with this camera. The benefits of this particular camera is the 4K 60 frames per second, and also it has built-in stabilization, in-body stabilization, which is very, very nice to have. That being said, what are you not getting? Well, you're not getting one lens that could do, say, 29 millimeter all the way to almost 400 that you would with the AX700. So that's one lens does it all pretty much with your Handycam versus carrying around extra lenses, etc. So that's point number one. Number two is going to be the built-in ND filters of the AX700, which you would have to stop and obviously put those on the lenses of your G9. So that's something else that you have to take into consideration. And third, the autofocus, which I think is probably the most critical thing. Sony has excellent autofocus, and the phase detection is wonderful. Plus, you can control how deep that autofocus goes, and with moving objects such as wildlife, that's going to be really, really critically important. And Panasonic, their autofocus has gotten better, but it's not fantastic. So ultimately, I'm going to have to side with the AX700. You still have a large 1-inch sensor, so you still can get some nice depth of field with this camera. And as far as 4K 60 frames per second, you know, most people are still watching videos in 1080p right now, especially on YouTube. But with 4K at 30 frames a second, you still have some beautiful, beautiful image quality. You're going to have to determine whether it's worth it to you to make those trades. Now, both cameras have dual SD cards and slot recording. Both have some degree of weather sealing on them. Both are going to be a good option. If you go with the G9, it's not a bad camera. And you may be very, very happy with it. But the Handycam was designed to shoot video from the ground up. That's its whole mission in life. So if that's what's really important to you, is capturing crisp video with super nice, fast autofocus, I think ultimately you'll probably be happier choosing the AX700. But I will tell you, I am biased towards the Sony Handycams. And I've just had great experience with them. I think they're reliable, and but nothing against the Micro Four Thirds Panasonic G9. But ultimately, it's going to depend on your use case scenario. Hopefully, that answers your question.